When the anxious walks away, the avoidance nightmare begins. You know what's funny? People spend years running, hiding, convincing themselves they don't need connection. They push away the very thing their soul craves. And they tell themselves a story. I'm better off alone. No one understands me. Commitment, no thanks. But let me tell you something. When the anxious walks away, the avoidant wakes up. That moment when the one who always chased you, always reassured you, always tried to pull you closer, when they leave, oh, that's when the real nightmare begins. Because suddenly silence isn't peaceful, it's deafening. Freedom doesn't feel freeing, it feels empty. Why? Because deep inside, the thing you feared most wasn't them suffocating you, it was you facing yourself. For years, you convinced yourself you didn't need them, that you were in control. But the truth? The anxious one was your safety net. They made you feel valued even when you didn't show up fully. And when they're gone, you realize you weren't avoiding them, you were avoiding your own pain. So listen up. If you feel that gut-wrenching loss when they finally stop trying, don't just numb it. Don't scroll through your phone hoping they'll reach out. Don't distract yourself with shallow connections that will never measure up. Face it, lean into it. Because on the other side of that fear is freedom. Not the illusion of freedom where you run, but the real kind, where you stay, where you grow, where you choose connection instead of fearing it. The nightmare only ends when you stop running. And the good news? You don't have to do it alone. But the first step? That's all you. True freedom isn't about shutting people out, avoiding connection, or convincing yourself that you don't need anyone. It's not independence, it's fear disguised as strength. It's a story you tell yourself to avoid vulnerability, to avoid the risk of being hurt, to stay in control. But let me tell you something. Control is an illusion when it's based on avoidance, because the very thing you think is protecting you is the same thing keeping you stuck. How many times have you pushed someone away, telling yourself it was the right decision? How often have you justified emotional distance by saying you just need space, or that relationships feel suffocating? Maybe you even pride yourself on being self-sufficient, on not needing validation from anyone. But if that were really true, why does it feel so unsettling when the person who cared the most finally stops chasing you? See, the mind is a master of deception. It convinces you that isolation is a choice when in reality it's a reaction to past wounds, a reaction to fears you haven't faced, a reaction to a deeper belief that connection will eventually lead to pain, so why risk it at all? But here's the truth. Avoidance isn't power. It's a defense mechanism. And defense mechanisms don't create happiness. They create barriers. What most avoidant people don't realize is that their idea of freedom is just a cleverly disguised form of self-protection. You think you're choosing independence, but really, you're just avoiding discomfort. Because real freedom isn't about running away. It's about having the ability to stand still, to stay, to trust, to let yourself be seen. But that requires facing the part of you that's afraid. And that's where most people stop. Avoidance often starts early in life. Maybe at some point you learned that emotional closeness came with conditions. Maybe you felt like love was something you had to earn, or that it was unpredictable, given one moment and taken away the next. So you adapted. You learned to rely on yourself. You told yourself that depending on others is dangerous, that attachment is risky, that needing someone is a weakness. And that belief shaped everything. Fast forward to today, and now every time someone gets too close, you feel that old resistance creeping in. Your body tenses. Your mind starts coming up with reasons why this isn't right, why they're too much, why you need space. And so you create distance, not because you don't care, but because deep down connection feels like a loss of control. But here's what you have to understand. True emotional strength isn't in how well you can detach. It's in how deeply you can connect without losing yourself. Think about it. If avoidance really led to happiness, why does it leave people feeling so unfulfilled? Why does so many avoidants struggle with emptiness once their partner finally walks away? Because what they thought was freedom was actually just fear keeping them safe. And safety isn't the same as happiness. Real independence isn't about needing no one. It's about being secure enough to let people in. It's about knowing that love and connection aren't threats, that being vulnerable won't break you, that intimacy isn't a trap but a choice. And the people who truly thrive in relationships aren't the ones who build walls, they're the ones who build trust. So ask yourself, are you actually free or are you just running? Because if your version of freedom leaves you feeling empty, distant, or regretful when the person who cared the most finally stops trying, then it was never freedom to begin with. It was just fear in disguise. And the moment you realize that, you have a choice. Keep running or finally stop, turn around, and face the thing you've been avoiding all along. The moment the anxious partner walks away, everything shifts. For so long, you've told yourself that distance is what you wanted, that relationships feel suffocating, that commitment is overwhelming, that people expect too much from you. You convinced yourself that the person who kept reaching out, who kept asking for reassurance, who kept trying to pull you closer was the problem. And you believed that if they would just back off, if they would just stop needing so much from you, then you'd finally feel at peace. But then they do. And instead of relief, there's a sinking feeling, a strange emptiness. Something feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. There's no more pressure, no more expectations, no one constantly checking in. You got what you wanted. So why does it feel so unsettling? Why does it feel like something is missing? Because the truth is, you weren't escaping them, you were escaping yourself. For as long as you can remember, you've built your life around maintaining emotional distance. Maybe you didn't even realize you were doing it. Maybe it just felt natural to prioritize your independence, to avoid too much closeness, to keep things casual. But what you never stop to consider is that the anxious person in your life wasn't just chasing you, they were also grounding you. They provided a sense of connection, of meaning, of consistency. They saw you even when you weren't showing up fully. They created a space for intimacy even if you never stepped all the way into it. And now that space is gone. At first you try to ignore it. You tell yourself that you're fine, that this is for the best. Maybe you even distract yourself. New hobbies, new people, anything to avoid the discomfort creeping in. But then there are those quiet moments, late at night in between distractions, when there's no noise left to drown it out. And that's when it hits you. The silence isn't peaceful, it's loud. Because for the first time, there's no one reaching out, no one asking where you are, how you feel, what's wrong, no one filling the space you used to take for granted. And without that, you're left with something you've spent years avoiding, your own thoughts, your own fears, your own emotions. Because here's what you never realized. The anxious one didn't just give you attention, they gave you a mirror. They reflected back parts of yourself you didn't want to see. The part of you that longs for love, but is afraid to admit it. The part of you that fears rejection, but protects itself by rejecting first. The part of you that craves connection, but sabotages it the moment it feels too real. And now, without them there to absorb the emotional weight, you have no choice but to face it. You start replaying moments in your head, the times they reached for you and you pulled away, the times they asked for reassurance and you shut down, the times they told you how much they cared and instead of receiving it, you found a way to minimize it. And now all of those moments are gone. The calls won't come, the messages won't pop up, the door you thought was always open has quietly closed. This is the moment when so many avoidant people wake up, when they realize that what they were avoiding wasn't just their partner's needs, it was their own. That pushing someone away didn't bring them peace, it just created emptiness. That their fear of intimacy didn't protect them, it isolated them. And now they're faced with a choice. Stay in the silence or finally break the pattern. Keep pretending they don't care or finally acknowledge what's been true all along. They weren't running from their partner. They were running from themselves. You told yourself you didn't need the reassurance. You convinced yourself that their constant check-ins, their need for closeness, their desire to understand you were too much. You believed that their emotional intensity was exhausting, that their longing for connection was suffocating. You saw their pursuit of you as a burden rather than a gift. But now that they're gone, something feels different. There's a quiet emptiness that wasn't there before. Because the truth is, you needed their reassurance more than you were willing to admit. For so long, they were the ones putting in the effort. They reached out first. They made sure you were okay. They tried to decode your silences, to read between the lines of your distant responses, to understand the things you never fully said. And even when you pulled away, they came closer. Even when you shut down, they stayed. Even when you left them questioning their worth, they still tried to show you yours. But now, all of that is gone. The good morning texts, gone. The late night check-ins, gone. The small acts of love that you once brushed off as too much, gone. And you didn't think it would affect you. You thought their absence would bring you peace, that space would finally let you breathe. But instead, it feels like something is missing, like a piece of your life has quietly disappeared, and now there's just nothing. What you never realize is that their persistence gave you something invaluable. It made you feel wanted without requiring you to fully show up. It gave you love without forcing you to be vulnerable. It let you experience connection without confronting your fear of intimacy. Their reassurance filled the emotional gaps you refused to acknowledge, and their consistency made up for the distance you created. And now that they've stopped trying, now that they've finally walked away, there's no one left to do that for you. You sit with your phone, half expecting a message that never comes. You go about your day, feeling an unspoken void that you can't quite put into words. You tell yourself it's nothing, that you just need time, that you were right to let them go, but deep down, something inside of you is starting to question that belief. Maybe it wasn't them who needed you, maybe you needed them. Maybe their emotional intensity wasn't a weakness, but a reflection of what you were too afraid to express. Maybe their need for reassurance wasn't about insecurity, it was about connection. And maybe, just maybe, the very things that once irritated you were actually the things that kept you grounded. Because here's the truth, their love made you feel safe, even if you didn't acknowledge it, even if you pretended not to care, even if you kept them at arm's length. They saw you even when you weren't fully showing up. They cared even when you acted like you didn't need them to. They reminded you over and over again that you were worth the effort. And now, without that constant presence, without their unwavering commitment, you're left with something unfamiliar, uncertainty. No longer can you rely on their persistence to bridge the emotional gap. No longer can you count on them to reach out when you withdraw. No longer can you lean on their love without having to give your own in return. And that realization, that's where the real discomfort begins. Because it's never been about whether or not they were too much. It's been about whether or not you were willing to let them in. It's been about your fear of vulnerability, your fear of being needed, your fear of emotional closeness. And now that they're gone, you have to face the truth. The reassurance they gave you wasn't a burden, it was a gift. And the absence of that gift is what's making you feel this way. At first, the silence feels like a relief. No more pressure. No more deep conversations about feelings, no more expectations to be something you weren't ready to be. It's just you, your space, your freedom, exactly what you thought you wanted. But then something strange happens. The silence doesn't feel peaceful, it feels loud. Follows you everywhere, filling the spaces where their voice used to be. You notice it in the morning when there's no message waiting for you. You notice it at night when there's no one asking how your day went. You notice it in the little moments when you used to brush them off, but now there's no one left to brush off. This is the part you never expected. You thought that once they walked away, you'd finally be able to relax, that without their constant need for connection, you'd feel lighter. But instead, the weight feels heavier because now, for the first time in a long time, you're left alone with your thoughts. And that's when the real discomfort begins. Because here's the truth. As much as you tried to convince yourself that their presence was overwhelming, it was also comforting. Their need to check in on you, their desire to be close, their habit of always being there. It gave you something that you never fully appreciated. It gave you consistency. It gave you a sense of security even if you never admitted it. It gave you connection without requiring you to be fully open in return. Now, there's no one left to do that for you. No one left to ask why you've been quiet all day. No one left to pull you back in when you start to drift away. No one left to hold on to you when you don't know how to hold on to yourself. And so the silence becomes deafening, because it forces you to sit with what you've been avoiding. You try to distract yourself. You scroll through your phone, but there's no message from them. You think about reaching out, but you don't. You tell yourself you're fine, but there's a nagging feeling that won't go away. And then it hits you. Maybe it was never about needing space. Maybe it was never about them being too much. Maybe all along the thing you were really avoiding was yourself. Because now, without their voice filling the gaps, all you're left with is your own. And it's asking questions you don't want to answer. Why did you push them away? Why did you shut down when they got too close? Why did you convince yourself that love was suffocating when deep down you needed it more than you knew? It's easy to pretend you don't care when someone is still there, still trying, still holding on. But when they finally let go, when they finally walk away, that's when the truth reveals itself. That's when you realize that the silence isn't peaceful, it's just empty. Because what you thought was freedom was actually avoidance. What you thought was control was actually fear. And what you thought you didn't need was actually something you depended on more than you ever realized. Now, the question is, what do you do with that realization? Do you keep pretending it doesn't matter? Do you keep running from the silence, filling it with distractions and empty interactions? Or do you finally face the thing you've been avoiding all along? The part of you that's afraid to let someone in, because if you don't, the silence will only get louder, and eventually you won't be able to ignore it anymore. At first, you tell yourself that nothing has changed, that life moves on, that people come and go, and that this is just another chapter closing. You convince yourself that you made the right decision, that things weren't meant to work out, that distance was necessary. You push away the lingering thoughts, the brief flashes of their voice in your mind, the memories of the way they used to look at you like you were the most important person in the world. But then something starts to shift. You find yourself reaching for your phone, half expecting a message from them. You scroll through old conversations, rereading words you once dismissed as too much. You remember the way they always checked in, always cared, always tried, even when you made it difficult for them. And suddenly, that absence becomes something you can't ignore. So you do what you've always done. You distract yourself. You throw yourself into work, into hobbies, into anything that keeps your mind occupied. You go out more, you keep busy, you tell yourself that this is just part of life. Maybe even seek comfort elsewhere, filling the void with fleeting interactions that never quite measure up. You surround yourself with people who don't ask the same deep questions, who don't challenge you to open up, who don't make you feel vulnerable in the way that they did. But no matter how much you distract yourself, there's still that quiet ache beneath it all, a lingering sense of loss that you can't seem to shake. Because deep down, you know the truth. Distractions won't fill the void. No amount of work, no number of social outings, no temporary connections can replace the depth of what you lost. The person who truly saw you, who fought for you, who stayed when you gave them every reason to leave. And now, when you look around, you realize that what you thought was freedom feels more like emptiness. You see, avoidance doesn't heal wounds, it just postpones the pain. And the longer you try to outrun it, the more it follows you. Because no amount of external noise can drown out the internal questions, the what ifs, the maybes, the did I make a mistake? And this is the moment that so many people face when the person they took for granted is no longer there. The realization that what they pushed away wasn't just another relationship. It was something real, something rare, something they weren't ready to receive at the time. But the problem with distractions is that they only work for so long. Eventually, the silence creeps back in, the thoughts return, the memories resurface. And no matter how much you try to suppress them, the truth remains the same. You can't outrun yourself. The only way to move forward is to face it, to sit with the discomfort, to ask yourself the hard questions, to stop numbing the emotions that are trying to teach you something. Because healing doesn't happen through avoidance, it happens through understanding, through growth, through recognizing that what you lost wasn't just a person, but an opportunity to change, to evolve, to become someone capable of truly showing up. And the sooner you stop running, the sooner you can begin to figure out what that really means. You always told yourself that you were fine on your own, that relationships were complicated, that closeness was overwhelming, that too much emotion was suffocating. You built walls not because you didn't care, but because caring felt risky. Letting someone in meant losing control, meant facing the possibility of disappointment, of rejection, of pain. So you stayed guarded. You kept things light. You avoided conversations that went too deep, moments that felt too vulnerable. And every time they asked for more connection, more commitment, more reassurance, you pulled away just enough to keep them at a distance. But now they're gone. And the strangest thing happens. You start to miss what you swore you never needed. You miss the way they made you feel seen, even when you were trying to disappear into your own world. You miss the way they reached for you, even when you weren't sure how to reach back. You miss the certainty they gave you, the way they loved you without hesitation, without question, without holding back. And then you realize something you've been avoiding for a long time. You weren't protecting yourself from them. You were protecting yourself from your own fear of being fully known. Because what if they had seen all of you, the parts you've spent years hiding even from yourself? What if they had stuck around long enough to break through the walls? What if they had stayed and you had no more excuses left to run? For so long, you convinced yourself that love felt like a trap, but now, without it, you feel less free than ever. Because true freedom isn't in running away, it's in the ability to stay, to trust, to let someone in without fear of losing yourself. And that's the hardest part for someone who has spent their whole life keeping people at a distance. It's not just about missing them, it's about realizing that you pushed away the very thing you needed most. It's about coming face to face with the fact that your fear of intimacy didn't protect you, it left you alone. And the worst part? You can't go back and undo it. They spent so long trying to hold on, trying to prove that they wouldn't leave, trying to be enough for you. And now that they're gone, they're not looking back. Because even the strongest, most loving person eventually learns that they cannot love for you. They cannot fight for you if you refuse to step into the ring. And now the silence isn't just silence, it's the sound of a door closing. So what do you do with that? You could keep running. You could convince yourself that it wasn't meant to be, that if they were really the right person, they would have stayed forever, even at the cost of their own needs. You could keep telling yourself that love should be easy, that if it's right, it won't challenge you, won't push you, won't make you uncomfortable. Or you could finally stop. Stop pretending that love is the problem when all along it was your fear of it. Stop acting like independence means isolation. Stop convincing yourself that needing someone is a weakness when in reality it's one of the greatest strengths. Because the truth is you weren't meant to do this alone. None of us were. But the only way to break the cycle is to admit that for the first time, you don't want to run anymore. You want to heal. You want to grow. You want to become the version of yourself that doesn't just love from a distance, but loves fully, fearlessly, and without hesitation. And maybe, just maybe, that's what this silence was trying to teach you all along. There's a moment when you realize the past isn't coming back. The person who once fought for you, who reached out even when you pulled away, who tried to understand you when you barely understood yourself, they're gone. Not in the dramatic way you expected, not with a slammed door or a final heartbreaking confrontation. No, they left quietly. They simply stopped trying, stopped reaching, stopped waiting for you to decide whether you wanted them or not. And that's when it hits you. At first you try to brush it off. You tell yourself that it's better this way, that relationships aren't supposed to be this hard, that if it were meant to be, they wouldn't have left. You fill the silence with distractions, work, hobbies, mindless scrolling, anything to keep your mind from wandering to them. But the silence has a way of creeping in no matter how much you try to drown it out. You find yourself wondering what they're doing, if they've moved on, if they still think about you the way you think about them. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but the fact that you're thinking about it at all says otherwise. Because deep down, you know the truth. You didn't really want them to leave. You just didn't know how to let them stay. And now it's too late. They gave you every chance to show up, to meet them halfway, to prove that you wanted them as much as they wanted you. And every time you hesitated, every time you let fear make the decision for you, every time you chose distance over closeness, detachment over vulnerability, silence over saying the words that might have changed everything, you thought they would always be there, that no matter how much space you needed, no matter how many times you pulled away, they would always come back. But they didn't. Not because they didn't love you, but because they finally realized that love isn't supposed to feel like chasing someone who never stops running. And now you're left with something you never expected: regret. Regret for all the moments you could have been honest, but chose to stay guarded. Regret for all the times they asked you what you wanted and you gave them nothing. Regret for believing that they would always wait, that you had endless time to figure it out, that you could take without ever truly giving. Because now you want to give. You want to tell them that they mattered, that you saw them even when you pretended not to, that you cared even when you acted like you didn't. But there's no one left to hear it. The opportunity is gone. And that's the hardest part of all, because now you understand. Now you see what they were trying to show you all along. Now you realize that love doesn't wait forever, that people eventually choose themselves, that pushing someone away enough times will eventually make them believe you meant it. And maybe this is exactly what you needed to learn. Maybe this is the wake-up call you've spent years avoiding. Maybe this is the moment you finally stop running, not because you lost them, but because you finally see what you were running from. Your own fear of being fully known, fully loved, fully seen. Because love was never the problem. Your walls were. Your fear was your belief that you had to protect yourself from something that was only ever trying to heal you. So now the question isn't whether you can get them back. The question is whether you can finally face yourself. Whether you can sit in the silence and let it teach you what you refused to learn before. Whether you can take this regret and turn it into something real, something that changes you, so that next time when love finds you again, you don't let it slip away. As we come to the end of this journey, it's important to reflect on what we've learned. In moments of emotional disconnect, when we pull away or when someone we care about walks away, we face not only the loss of the connection, but also the fear, the avoidance, and the deeply rooted emotional patterns within ourselves. It's easy to point fingers at the other person, to believe they were too much, too needy, or too intense, but the real work lies in looking inward, understanding that what we often push away is the very thing that could help us heal, grow, and become who we are meant to be. The truth is, we all fear intimacy, we all fear vulnerability, and we all fear being fully seen. But it is only by facing those fears, by embracing the discomfort that comes with letting someone in, that we can truly experience love and connection at their fullest. The absence of someone we once pushed away becomes a mirror to our own inner world, a place where we can choose to reflect, to learn, and to grow. So what happens when the anxious partner walks away? The avoidance nightmare begins, not because of the absence of that person, but because of the opportunity it creates for us to finally face ourselves. It is in this silence, this space, that we realize our own patterns, our own fears, and our own need for connection. The healing begins when we stop running, when we choose to face what we've been avoiding. And if you found yourself here, wondering, reflecting, growing, remember that it's never too late to change, to open yourself up to deeper love, deeper connection, and deeper self-acceptance. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I hope these words have resonated, have sparked something within you, and have helped you see that healing and growth are possible for all of us. Remember, the power to change is within you. The first step starts with acknowledging the truth and embracing the journey ahead. Thank you.